This is the DeFi download at Permissionless 2022, brought to you by Bancor. I'm here joined by Mark Richardson and Nate Hindman from Bancor. So guys, I wanted to talk a bit about Bancor V3. Obviously, you just launched the first phase of it, so you've got 4 pools out. I have been a longtime user of your single-sided LPs, which offer impermanent loss protection. What's new with V3? Like, if you were to summarize that for the average DeFi user.
Yeah, so Bancor version 2.1, as you know, as a user, had impermanent loss protection and single-sided staking, right? And these were sort of huge innovations for AMMs, for its time. But it wasn't without friction. The size that the liquidity pools could be allowed to grow was capped, and the insurance vesting was defined over a 100-day period. And so with Bancor version 3, I think 2 of the most important user-facing features are the fact that IL protection is now instantaneous. You don't have to wait 100 days to be protected, and that there is no bottleneck to providing as much liquidity as you want. Bancor version 3 can accept unlimited deposits, and it's because of a very clever way that we partition the liquidity that the protocol has available to it that allows it to manage that IL risk in an extremely sustainable way.
Yeah, I remember, so like in November, I want to say it was November 2020, that's when I first deposited into a Bancor single-sided LP. I honestly thought I would go in and I would get out of it within 100 days. I actually remember setting my calendar, withdraw in 100 days, and to date, I think it's the longest LP I've ever been in. Actually, multiple LPs now that I've continued to stay in. Part of the reason was just the fact that with liquidity provisions, I've always been used to knowing that the volatility brings lots of trading fees, which is great, but it also brings a lot of pain in terms of impermanent loss. And so, yeah, with V3, I mean, you really solved for a number of issues that we were feeling as users. One of those was the caps, which in a good way, you filled up all of these limited single-sided LPs. There was only so much limited liquidity or limited deposits that were allowed. But then the 100 days is now just a 7-day withdrawal. So there's also a 0.25% withdrawal fee. Can you tell me more about what's the reason for that? Is that to prevent someone from exploiting or attacking that part of the protocol?
Yeah, it's exactly right. So I'm gonna publish a paper that explores some of the mathematics behind Bancor version 3 design. But yeah, essentially the withdrawal fee is a necessary component that kind of powers that withdrawal mechanism. And it essentially means that it's impossible to create a situation where an MEV bot, for example, might provide liquidity and then try and instantly withdraw it in order to create a situation where they can close an arbitrage opportunity or something and therefore extract more value from the protocol than they put in. And so that 0.25% withdrawal fee is effectively this kind of buffer zone that the protocol uses to determine which part of the withdrawal algorithm it should commit to based on the size of the user's withdrawal. So yeah, it's a necessary component of the withdrawal algorithm. It can be set to 0, by the way. If the Bancor DAO decides that there should be no withdrawal fee, that's fine, but we just lose some of that really interesting utility that we get from having it there in the first place. So for example, on Bancor version 2.1, if there's IL in your position, you basically are guaranteed that your position is going to be refunded at least partially in BNT to kind of make you whole as a liquidity provider. On Bancor version 3, that's not always true. Even if you've got IL in your position, you can withdraw your LP and get 100% the token that you staked. And the reason that that's possible is because of that withdrawal fee and some of the the magic that happens behind the scenes in order to make financial sense. So I think that it's a minor inconvenience, but what you get out of it is that users who are providing whatever TKN that they provided, withdrawing only that TKN, it just removes a huge amount of friction. So I think that it's I concede that it's not ideal, right? No one likes to have a withdrawal fee. but it's so small compared to like the overall volatility of crypto markets in general. Like, you know, on a Tuesday, right, your position might change by 20% or more. So 0.25% at the end of, you know, a yield accumulating period, it just seems like such a small price to pay for that added, you know, peace of mind that the token that you're withdrawing most likely is going to be 100% the token that you provided.
Yeah, I have sometimes thought about these single-sided LPs almost like a vault, and because obviously most of us have been LPs in like a Uniswap where we're pairing a token with whatever other token, two tokens together. When I deposit my single token, you're basically taking it, pairing it with BNT, you know, market making, but then you're essentially taking the hit on the impermanent loss. And what's been interesting is, and I think it was a kind of a bold bet, in November 2020, I mean, we had just lived through DeFi summer, and there was a lot of talk about whether that was the top of the market. And I think what's been interesting is you've sort of proven that this model works in a very volatile bull run where you're earning so much in trading fees for BNT holders that it's essentially compensating for like any sort of impermanent loss. So I've tended to think of it as like the Bancor DAO and BNT holders just in general, but is taking the other side of that bet. I'm lending my one token. I'm calling myself an LP, but really I'm just lending a single token, and then you're doing all that magic under the hood for me, which at this point with V3 is radical because now I can truly withdraw. Like, I mean, I've got a 7-day delay, but that's nothing compared to V2 where, you know, it took 100 days for me to reach that threshold to have the privilege of having 100% impermanent loss protection. So another part of Bancor V3 is the dual rewards, which is designed to allow someone to create a liquidity mining rewards program, but powered by Bancor V3. So can either of you kind of walk me through like how does that work, the dual rewards mechanism?
Yeah, so the dual rewards is kind of referring to this, you know, this early promotional period where we want everyone to get really excited by Bancor version 3, where the Bancor DAO is, you know, willing to continue to incentivize liquidity provision with the BNT token as it always has, which is also healthy for the BNT token distribution. And so, you know, it's a perfectly healthy thing to do. But the reason why you can have two rewards at once is because Bancor version 3 supports third parties providing their own liquidity mine incentives. But what's special about third parties participating in their own, you know, liquidity incentives is that it can be executed in a auto-compounding and gasless fashion. And so how this is done, it benefits both the community and the project that's doing it. And so, for example, imagine that you are a new token project and you've got like a $200,000 budget for liquidity mining, for example. Now, over the course of a liquidity mining campaign on something like, you know, SushiSwap or Uniswap, or, you know, the standard sort of, you know, staking contracts, the idea is that these tokens that you're providing to users as incentives are slowly sort of trickled into the market and end up as sticky liquidity. Now, whether or not that's a good assumption or not is not something that we have to address.
Actually, to add context there, I think that this is a part of what's been broken with liquidity mining.
Yeah.
You LP, you stake the LP. So by the way, you're wasting all that gas to just doing like added actions, and then you have to go and claim separately the tokens. Then if you wanted to LP and like compound the LP, you have to take that token, which you might even sell 50% of it just to create the LP. It's a lot of stuff that people don't want to have to do. Whereas in the V3 dual reward system, first off, I'm benefiting from the liquidity that is added, that is the rewards itself. So like that's sitting in the pool. Then as an LP, as I earn it, I'm accruing that reward, but I don't have to go claim it, waste all the gas money on it. And then also, at the end of the day, I mean, it's just the fact that it is compounding it. So like, I'm earning more. Like, it's really like, to be clear, I have studied this so much and like, obviously talked with you guys so much about this because as like a power user using those single-sided LPs, it has always felt like it's too good to be true. And I think like the truth is that like you've just solved for a bunch of really difficult problems. It doesn't come without any risk, which we'll talk about in a moment. Is there anything else you think worth noting there about like the V3 features that I just mentioned?
I guess just that point you just made about the current process for, let's say, auto compounding rewards and the way rewards are currently set up, it's no wonder that like most altcoins are bleeding versus L1 tokens. So if you think about the process when that auto compounding happens, right? The token project is minting new tokens. And then in order for it to get auto compounded, if you're using a third party auto compounder, it's just getting like auto liquidated back into ETH.
Right.
So it's like there's no, with how prevalent rewards have been and how, people have all of a sudden picked up on them being totally unsustainable and really broken for the token projects, it's no wonder that these charts look the way they do versus the L1 tokens, because it's like structurally built in to the first generation of mining rewards. And so we really think that this is going to be, in the same way that synthetics and compounds set off DeFi summer through the original form of yield farming and mining rewards. We feel like this new version could offer that to the market by saying, the rewards exist as liquidity from day one in the pool. They don't need to be auto liquidated in order to be auto compounded. And that's really because of the single-sided nature of the pools. They can be reconstituted because it's, a single-sided
That's another point to make is in traditional liquidity mining, we tend to reward the total value of the LP. But here we're only rewarding the single token that you're depositing, which I've always thought it's like, okay, yeah, we're spending 50% less ideally than the way it works otherwise. So it's just, at the end of the day, you're allowing someone to be an LP, continue to earn rewards, but just let it passively sit and accrue that and continue, which I can speak to my own experience. If you allow me to continually compound and earn more without doing anything, I am way more likely to do that. Whereas when I know that like I have to go claim that reward token, I'm always thinking, how much is that reward token worth? Should I claim it now? Should I then zap it and sell 50% of it into the LP? And so there's a lot of, good behavior that I'm hoping results from like this new release.
And even a bigger issue, if you think about the people who are like left standing inside of AMMs today, because most token holders have realized if I'm long on an asset and I really care about it, I probably shouldn't put it in a liquidity pool, given the risks I face with impermanent loss. And the people who are left standing are these sort of like institutional, mercenary yield farmers who go from high APR pool to high APR pool. And so as a token project, you end up dumping your rewards on people that are just like these mercenary farmers and aren't necessarily your long-term holders. Now with Bancor, because people know it's single-sided, you're fully protected from IL, it really attracts your token holders to your pool. So you end up dumping rewards on people who are most inclined and who are interested to continue holding them. So I think that that's like an underrated component of it, is that you're really giving it to people who are least likely to dump it, unlike traditional AMMs.
One last question. Obviously, we've covered all the benefits of Bancor V3, and I'm clearly a fan as a user, but it doesn't come at zero cost. So, like, can you talk me through, like, what are some of the risks, and then maybe some of the precautions that the Bancor protocol would take if there was like a major BNT sell-off, or I guess any other sort of major threat to like the way that single-sided LPs work?
Yeah, the threats are real, and I think one of the things that distinguishes Bancor from other some other protocols that have failed recently, right? Is that we aren't ignoring that these threats are there. Right, we are aware of them. We acknowledge them, and we are constantly building new systems. We are hiring economists, actuaries to help us manage the risk of the protocol, just like any insurance company would. And so it's not the case that things are ever going to be entirely devoid of risk, but you can still manage it effectively over time. And if it was impossible to do that, then the insurance sector and traditional finance just wouldn't exist. And so we have hundreds of years of precedent to base the type of product that we've built on, right? It's not like, as an AMM protocol, right, and as a DeFi protocol, it is very innovative what we're doing. And I don't want to sort of belittle what we've made. But in terms of economic theory, insurance is really old, right? It's not like we have to reinvent, quantum physics or something to offer the product that we have. All we need to do is study what is already known about these things and then apply those learnings from traditional finance to DeFi. It is difficult, right? These things are extremely complex. And, because it is a decentralized autonomous organization, we also need to make sure that the voters understand how to evaluate these risks and how to manage the protocol. And so these are very significant challenges. But I'm confident that we can overcome them because we are staring them in the face, right? We are facing them down. I think that the biggest mistakes of, some of the cryptocurrency leaders that have seen their protocols collapse is that they treat themselves as being invulnerable, right? Or that their protocol is too big to fail, right? And that by refusing to acknowledge that those systemic risks are there, they do nothing to prevent them. And then that's when you accidentally break your protocol or your protocol breaks itself. So we're not doing that. We're constantly, luck favors the paranoid. We're constantly analyzing what's going wrong and whether or not the protocol is behaving correctly and whether or not the economics make sense. And developing better systems of monitoring those things. And eventually we're going to roll out a whole analysis suite and expose that to the community that's actually going to write its own proposals, right? We want to create an AI that does the economic analysis every week and then provides kind of a checkup, right, for the community to vote on that just becomes a part of the DAO process. And we can have economists and guests constantly come in and sort of opine on what it is that our system is doing and whether or not it's good enough, and constantly develop it. But yeah, the risk will never go away, but that's okay because I think that we can still manage it well.
So we've talked a lot about how Bancor is benefiting DeFi users, but how is Bancor V3 specifically benefiting the industry in general?
Yeah, so there's, there's more than one answer that I could give to this question. But what I want to sort of reiterate is that we have developed a way that you can now incentivize liquidity without driving your token price into the ground, right? And this is addressing a really systemic issue that I think has plagued all of DeFi since DeFi summer. But even things like the single-sided staking paradigm means that DAO treasuries can be staked without having to sell half of it for ETH or something, to deposit both sides of the pool simultaneously. And for legal reasons, there are some DAOs that even can't, sell half their treasury for ETH in order to provide liquidity with it. So in terms of, DAOs themselves becoming liquidity providers on Bancor, is something that we've seen, catch on in quite a profound way.
I've been a part of this. I forget, Nexus Mutual, we voted to deposit, we wrapped some NXM and dropped it in, and it makes all the sense in the world because we're deepening liquidity, but we're not having to pair the LP, we're not having to sell any of our own token. Yeah, I cannot imagine more DAOs would not benefit from that, because what else are you supposed to do with your token at that point?
Yeah, and so there have been, a handful of attempts to address this kind of liquidity problem that DAOs face. And I'm not going to name any of these protocols on this podcast, but a lot of the conversations that I've had from token teams using some of those solutions, they were, let's say, they were very disappointed with the results, basically. And it was listening to those stories and actually sort of getting feedback, not from users, but from builders somewhere else in the industry, at what they need an AMM to be. And so Bancor version 3 really isn't just an amalgamation of all the user feedback that we've had, but also all the team feedback that we've had.
And I think that's been proven out in the launch, which just happened last week. It's only 4 pools live today, but in the coming weeks, there'll be 150 plus pools that we had in V2.1 going live in V3. And so for the launch partners of the launch, we had everyone from Synthetics to Wirearn to Engine, Nexus, who are providing DAO treasury capital to increase the liquidity of their token, to get passive yield on it without having to worry about impermanent loss or pairing it. And also a really cool thing that's going to become more apparent to the industry as this is live for a little bit is we brought back pool tokens to the system. So in V2.1, when you deposited liquidity, your pool token was immediately deposited into a protection contract, which offered, the protection that we give, but the pool token, your position, was not fungible. And so now we brought back pool tokens. You can deposit liquidity and get back a pool token. And what's different about these than other pool tokens, let's say Unity pool token or a Sushi pool token, is it can't drop below the value of its underlying asset. So because of impermanent loss in most pool tokens, it can be worth less than the underlying assets. But this becomes a very interesting sort of DeFi money Lego or piece of collateral when it's protected against IL and can't drop below. It becomes a sort of up-only pool token. And all of a sudden we're seeing projects actually saying, okay, well, we can use this pool token, let's say, as a governance token to do voting, or as the native staking collateral inside our protocol. And all of a sudden, their holders don't have to decide between natively staking their asset and providing liquidity to it. Because if all your assets are natively staked and your liquidity completely dries up, it can create a lot of instability in your token, be less desirable for people to hold it because they can't liquidate without massive slippage or affecting the price. So, native staking and liquidity provision kind of wrapped up in these fungible, single-sided, IL-protected pool tokens, we think is going to be a massive innovation that can really kind of...
Yeah, I mean, this is something I want to see more of the DAOs that I'm invested in participate in, because we're clearly in a bear market now, or at least we're in a downtrend, and those tokens that sit in these massive treasuries, they're just not getting used, when really in a downtrend you want to have as deep a liquidity as possible, and I want to find as many ways to make use of that liquidity while we're in this downtrend, while we're building, while we're trying to continue to support all the stuff that you do as a protocol. And so it's I almost forgot about this just because there's so much I've been focused on as like your average DeFi investor. But DAOs should not be holding on to these enormous amounts of tokens. They should be finding a way to make that productive.
Yeah, people have been talking about super fluid liquidity for a while. It was a theory that is like 2 or 3 years old at this point. And because liquidity pools were kind of affected by impermanent loss, it really hasn't come to fruition. We think this could finally kind of create super fluid liquidity that can exist sort of 2 different places. And we're really at a time right now in DeFi where I think everyone is just like, feeling a lot of pain. Crypto is hurting. And, this is a pretty timely time for Bancor V3, our biggest protocol update in the first DeFi protocol ever to launch, that we hope we can sort of remind the industry that there are builders still building and bears are for building, right? And there's still so much left to do in terms of like innovation in DeFi. And so I hope that, Bancor V3 is a sort of reminder of that. It's just the industry's moving forward and there's like bright days ahead.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining me, and congrats on V3. When is the next phase of V3 going to launch? Because right now the 4 pools are Link, DAI, BNT, and ETH. So I guess, what is that next phase of the launch?
Yeah, so the DAO will vote soon on when we want to deploy full launch in terms of the 150 plus tokens that are whitelisted in V2.1 that will then immediately go live, or at least are being proposed to all go live at the same time. And that will be sort of full, no restraints, V3, no caps on the pools, all the features that you get from day one. And we can really start to see this thing kind of perform in an amazing way. And also at the time when those pools go live, you'll see the rewards get activated on them too. So LPs will be collecting dual-sided rewards that are protected from IL. We think the yields will be super competitive in the industry, and it'll be sort of just a safer, simpler way to stake. This sort of, high yield savings account product that people have been really dying for, I'd say, in crypto and DeFi, I think will really come to fruition in this launch. So I would say within a week to weeks of having that sort of full network launch go live. And yeah, it'll be pretty awesome to watch. We're already at about 300 million in TVL just after a few days in a down market. When in the initial phase, gas costs were spiking during the dumping. And now we've already seen a good amount of liquidity move over. And we think once the full network launch goes live, past the 4 pools, it'll just be off to the races.
Well, once you guys are fully launched with V3, I'm just excited because I would anticipate you're going to move to an L2, which I'm dying for us to move to an L2 despite all the gas efficiency improvements. So anyways, congrats on V3 though. And thanks for joining. And yeah, well, I guess we'll talk.
Appreciate all your support along the way too.
Oh yeah, no problem. Like I said, I'm still in those LPs. That's not like, I'm still in those. I've been in those
Set and forget.
18 months. What is that? Yeah, almost coming up on 2 years. So pretty nuts. I got to just migrate over once you make that available. So awesome.